Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, U.S. lawmakers scrambled to pass pro-Israel legislation before President Barack Obama's visit to Israel. Members of the House of Representatives have drafted several bills which they hope will safeguard the Jewish state. The move comes in response to rumors that the president will demand a timetable for an Israeli withdrawal from Judea and Samaria, as well as pressure Israel to wait before taking action on the Iranian nuclear issue. The Senate, meanwhile, has called on the Obama administration to provide diplomatic, military, and economic support to Israel if the government of Israel is compelled to take military action in self-defense. The House will vote on the bill to make Israel a major strategic ally of the United States. This proposal highlights the cooperation between Israel and the U.S., and will allow Israelis to travel to America without visas. The legislation is timed to coincide with AIPAC's annual meeting in Washington, where thousands of lobbyists will push for the measures to be enacted into law. It's hoped that the measures will pass before Barack Obama's upcoming visit to Israel.
Dozens of Palestinian members of the Islamic movement's northern branch demonstrated against the upcoming visit to Israel by U.S. President Barack Obama outside the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv last week. Movement leader Sheikh Raed Saleh said that the protest was organized to send Obama the message that he is not welcome to visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Western Wall in Jerusalem's Old City, as has been reported to be included on the presidential tour. According to Saleh, the presence of Israeli security guards accompanying Obama would signify that the president sanctifies Israeli occupation of Jerusalem. And he warned that there would be repercussions if Obama follows through with the plan. Activists declared that Obama's reconciliation with Netanyahu should not come at their expense and shouted out their willingness to sacrifice their lives and blood for the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
An FBI informant has come out of hiding to warn the United States against agreeing to repeated pleas from Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi to release convicted terrorist Omar Abdel Rahman. Sheikh Rahman is a vicious extremist who plotted the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, which killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. The informant, Imad Salem, believes Rahman will continue to try and kill Americans if freed. Known as the Blind Sheikh, Rahman is an icon of radical Islam. He has inspired Muslims to take up jihad and has issued numerous fatwas, or religious rulings, against people who do not agree with his views. Rahman supported Morsi's election, saying that it is a victory for Islam. Morsi and other Arab leaders are pressuring U.S. President Barack Obama to release the convicted terrorist on the grounds that his health is failing.
Syrian opposition forces have reportedly conquered the city of Raqqa and toppled the statue of former Syrian President Hafez al-Assad. Video footage was released by the Free Syria Army, purportedly showing residents kicking and pounding the downed monument to the father of current leader Bashar al-Assad. In addition to holding the northern central town, the rebel forces are now believed to be fighting for control of a nearby airport. The Syrian resistance is claiming to have killed Hezbollah's second-in-command last week, saying that Naim Qassem died after being severely injured when the convoy that he was traveling in was attacked. Several high-ranking Syrian officials were also reportedly wounded in that same blast.
Two Syrian rockets landed in the Golan Heights last week. The missiles were most likely the result of misfire in the battles between forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian opposition. In his address to the United Nations Security Council, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Ron Prosser, said that Israel has shown maximum restraint thus far, but Israel cannot be expected to stand idle as the lives of its citizens are being put at risk by the Syrian government's reckless actions.
And as the Syrian civil war is set to enter its third year, the United Nations is discussing its peacekeeping mission on the Syrian border. Croatia announced last week that it intends to withdraw all of its troops from the multinational UN Disengagement Observer Force that has been stationed in the buffer zone since the 1974 Israeli-Syrian ceasefire. According to Russia's ambassador to the UN and president of the Security Council, Vitaly Churkin, there is a very new and dangerous phenomenon of armed groups operating in the UN-controlled zone in the Golan Heights. Churkin pointed out that there is nothing in UNDOF's mandate that allows the UN force to deal with that situation because they are unarmed observers. Israel, meanwhile, has filed complaints with the UN Security Council over the presence of Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Iranian forces in Syria. One of the greatest concerns to regional security is the possibility that the chemical weapons arsenal belonging to the Assad regime could fall into the hands of one of these terror groups.
Lebanese news outlets are reporting that Hezbollah terror boss Hassan Nasrallah was hospitalized in Beirut and then flown by presidential transport to Tehran. The reports claim that Nasrallah has been diagnosed with cancer and is being treated in the hardline Islamic Republic. Nasrallah did make a televised appearance after the initial reports, denying the rumors of his illness. However, Lebanese news sites insist that Nasrallah's speech originated in the Iranian capital, where the terrorist leader is being treated by a host of doctors from Iran, Venezuela, Egypt, Bahrain, and Jordan.
The Palestinian Center for Human Rights is expressing grave concern over increased travel restrictions that Hamas is placing on the residents of Gaza. According to the Gaza-based watchdog organization, Hamas is now requiring that all of those who want to leave the enclave to enter Israel must obtain exit visas. A previous attempt to impose a similar restriction last year was rescinded after the eruption of violent protests.
Safed Hospital has discharged 6 of 7 Syrian men who entered Israel seeking medical attention. After performing surgery and monitoring the men for more than 2 weeks, Israel deemed 6 of the men fit to return to Syria at their request. Israel took every precaution to make sure that the men returned to their country safely and without detection by the Assad regime in order to ensure their safety. 1 Syrian man remains hospitalized in critical condition in Safed.
A British newspaper has published satellite images of clouds of steam emerging from the Arak plutonium facility in Iran. Heavy water is used to operate the plant's nuclear reactor to produce plutonium, which can then be used to create atomic weapons. Arak is located about 150 miles southwest of Tehran and is surrounded by anti-aircraft missile and artillery sites. Officials at the Institute for Science and International Security say that if that reactor reaches full capacity, it would be able to produce about 20 pounds of plutonium a year. This latest development comes as the hardline Islamic Republic released the details of the production of 3,000 new advanced centrifuges designed to be installed at the Natanz nuclear facility and could drastically accelerate Iran's nuclear program.
Al-Qaeda has launched a new English-language magazine to teach extremists how to plan successful terror attacks. Released on fanatic Islamist websites across the internet, the magazine printed a list of people wanted dead or alive for crimes against Islam. It provides tips on how to cause general havoc and teaches terrorists how to light cars on fire and how to cause traffic accidents.
One of the oldest synagogues in the world was badly damaged in mortar fire launched by Syrian forces last week. Built as a shrine to the prophet Elijah, the ancient Jewish house of worship was erected to commemorate the site where tradition holds that Elijah anointed Elisha as prophet. Syrian opposition forces released video footage of the 2,000-year-old structure, showing that sections of the roof and building were blown off.
Egypt has been engulfed by a plague of locusts. A swarm of 30 million insects descended upon Egypt just as Jews began to prepare for the Passover holiday, which commemorates the miracles which God performed to free the children of Israel from Egyptian slavery. The skies over Cairo are black with thick clouds of flying locusts. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization repeatedly warned Egyptian authorities of the threat of insect infestation last year, and in January issued a locust alert, but their warnings were ignored. The locusts have already caused several $1 million in damage to Egyptian crops. Small swarms of the winged insects have already been reported in part of the Gaza Strip, and the Israeli Agricultural Ministry has designated a special task force to prepare in case the infestation spreads to southern Israel.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Dr. Petra Helt, the Executive Director of the Ecumenical Theological Research Fraternity in Israel. Dr. Helt, thank you for being on the show.
Wonderful. I'm very, very excited to be here and to bring the message of love and of peace from Jerusalem. This is a place where God took his seat, and to work here is such a privilege, a blessing, unbelievable.
Dr. Helt, what is the Ecumenical Fraternity Research Center in Israel?
We are working with all the different Christians that exist in the world together here in the land of Israel, meaning all the Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant Christians.
You know, it's interesting that there are those who support Israel who are more Bible-believing, believing in covenant theology, and those who even divest from Israel who believe in replacement theology. Why do you think there's such a difference in the way different Christian denominations handle the issue of Israel?
Many Christians here in the country, the Orthodox, the Catholics and Protestants, they are Bible-believing Christians. And I would like to underscore the Orthodox as well as the Catholics. They are Bible-believing Christians. There are others who are not so much going with the Bible, but rather with an agenda. And the agenda is, this country belongs to us.
Where did this idea of replacement theology come from? The early church, had no concept of this. How has this become so prevalent in Christian theology?
Right. In the early church, you won't find it. But when the Muslim conquest started in 639 here in Jerusalem in the 7th century, they claimed this is their land. And when the Crusaders came to reconquer the land in the 12th century, they said, no, it's our land, it's us. And this is how they brought the message of the land belonging to the Christians only in the 12th century to Europe.
Dr. Helt, you were just honored by the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus and the World Jewish Congress for your commitment to supporting Israel and working with Israel. Why have you dedicated your life to supporting Israel through education?
Well, I guess this is a call. The Lord called me to be here in Jerusalem, and I started over 30 years ago, and together with my husband, we continued working with the Christians, and the Lord blessed this work. So our field is the academia, and we try to convince that the academic teachers need to change their teaching away from replacement theology to a biblical understanding of the land of Israel.
Dr. Helt, you have a new initiative now called the Protestant Consultation on Israel and the Middle East. Can you tell us a little bit about this initiative?
Oh, this is wonderful. We just started it in last November, and you should look it up on the internet, pcime.org. It is a consultation of Protestant pastors from all over the world who are fed up with their leadership of the churches that are so much anti-Israel, who support the Palestinian cause and the BDS, that is a boycott, divestment and sanction of Israel, while they are Bible-believing Christians and say, no, we don't do this. And since they are shunned away from any kind of hierarchy, from any kind of doing work really in the church, we started to collect all those people in order to give them strength and to start a virtual church, if you like, that is full of Bible-believing Christians.
One of the things that is just so puzzling is that mainline churches in Israel have complete freedom of religion. It's the only country in the Middle East where you have freedom of religion. They have property rights, they can have freedom of movement. Why are some of these churches divesting from Israel? Why would they try to punish Israel where Israel's the only place they have access and freedom?
Well, it is that they have put on their agenda a political idea. The political idea is liberation theology, it is human rights theology, and is very much hooked up with a Muslim aspiration of the land. So that's where it is.
You know, we've had Christian leaders in Israel who are from mainline churches saying that they are Palestinian first and Catholic second. Why is there such a cooperation at the leadership level, even though not at the grassroots, with the Palestinians who are persecuting Jews in ways persecuting Christians in ways we've never seen before?
That's right. It has to do with power. You see, you go with the one who is supposedly more mighty today in the world, and that seems to be the Muslim cause, and that seems to be the main leadership of the established Protestant churches like the World Council of Churches and other churches, and so they don't want to lose their powerful positions, and this is why they're doing it.
Recently, the Pope just stepped down. How will this affect the relationship between the Vatican and Israel?
I don't think it will affect it very much, because it's not only the Pope who directs the policies of the Vatican, but it's a whole gremium of people, or the cardinals, etc. And I'm quite sure that it will continue in a particular way. We have to be careful, though, that it is not continuing only in an interreligious dialogue situation, by which Israel and the Jewish and Christian dialogue is phased out, and we have to make sure and point out that we need to have a continuation of the Jewish-Christian relation.
Dr. Petra Helt, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think that you are wonderful people. You love Israel because you love the Lord. Continue to love the Lord. And then also continue to tell the truth about the situation of Israel. The truth is that Christians here in Israel have a free life. They are supported by Israel. And there is a cooperation between the Christians and the Jews in Israel. And that is the only way for Christians who are so miserably persecuted in the world, in the West, in the Middle East, that they will get any help. They only get help. The persecuted Christians in the Middle East only get help if they have the support, the honest support from the Western churches. This is what I would like to ask you to do: to support the Christians, the persecuted Christians in the world, and Israel, because you love the Lord.
Thank you, Dr. Helt, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Elkins, and this is Israel Up Close. A recycling revolution is underway in Israel's infamous Syria landfill site on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. This once toxic garbage dump, which was Israel's largest, has been transformed from a place filled with trash to one filled with learning, where younger generations discover the importance of keeping our world clean and green. Viva Press visited the former dump site and filed this report.
For the residents of Tel Aviv, one of the city's best-known landmarks is not an archaeological or historically important site, but rather this massive landfill known as Syria. For decades, an endless convoy of trucks dumped the nation's garbage here. By the time Syria was closed in 1998, the mountain of waste had reached an unbelievable height of 60 meters, and the stench and ugliness was unbearable.
I think that in the past people just don't care what happened in Syria, and because of it, the government didn't care.
It took years for authorities to put a stop to this environmental tragedy, but today Syria is in a process of rejuvenation. The landfill is now being transformed into the largest and most advanced environmental center in the country, including a waste sorting and recycling center, an educational unit, and a green energy production facility. Syria has even become a top destination for school trips. Children learn about past mistakes and the importance of keeping the environment clean and green. Here, they are playing a game that shows what happens to the garbage they throw out.
We hope to change the way we treat the environment, and I see the difference now. Kids are more aware, and they come more with plastic bags, boxes instead of plastic bags that they reuse all the time. And you can see small things, but still it changes.
Recycling is another important lesson. The visitor center is decorated with what can best be described as discarded object art.
I uncreate garbage. I take garbage from the streets, from here around this area, and I do many things with it. Furniture and lamps and accessories for fashion design, and also clothes.
The garbage has not left Syria completely. Trucks still dump refuse at the site, which has now become an environmentally friendly waste transfer station. That is, garbage is brought here, sorted, recycled, and what's left is shipped out to a remote dump in the Negev.
We must do more and more recycle, so as little garbage as we can will go for dumping, and as much as we can will be recycled and used as new commodities.
There are a number of innovative projects underway at the transformed Syria landfill. Inside these green containers, waste is being converted into natural gas, which is used for power at the site and factories in the area. Over here, irrigation water is being produced from raw sewage. The waste fluid is pumped into a series of soil-filled pools that filters and purifies the water through a bioremediation process. And while residents not so long ago avoided coming anywhere close to Syria, officials believe this site will soon attract the masses.
I think that if this dream will come true, people from all over the world will come to Syria to learn how to take a place that was neglected by the people and make it the core of the metropolis.
Towering over Tel Aviv, Syria once symbolized the height of mismanagement. Now it has the potential of becoming a beacon of environmental awareness.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Welcome to another episode of the ICJ report. We are just down a few days from the Passover holidays. The Passover season is one of the most important seasons in the Jewish calendar, where the Jewish people is commemorating the liberation from Egypt and the wonderful way how God delivered the Jewish people out of bondage and out of slavery. Every year it's celebrated by a big traditional meal which is called the Passover Seder. And the International Christian Embassy over the past few years helped many hundreds of families all over this country to celebrate this Passover Seder in a way which gives them dignity and also the joy of that holiday. Today we have with us the aid director of the International Christian Embassy, Nicole Yoder, which is working in that field for many years. And Nicole, welcome to that program. And also I would like to ask you, we are helping those hundreds of families over the Passover season. If you look to Israel, it's a very wealthy country. Is this aid really needed?
It certainly is really needed, Jürgen. I know that about almost 25% of the population in Israel today live below the poverty line. And particularly at the holidays, welfare departments are flooded with requests for people wanting to celebrate this holiday with dignity.
So what are the typical people which we are helping now in this coming holiday season?
The people that we're assisting are single-parent families, elderly, maybe new immigrant families, families who maybe are suffering from illness, sickness, and they're living off of government pensions that really give only a minimal subsistence for them.
I know you met over the years which you are working hundreds of people here in this land. Could you give us some examples in particular relating to Passover, what you experienced over the past years?
Well, one family particularly comes to my mind. We were delivering food packages to families at the holiday, and this family, when we came to their door with this package of food, The woman saw the food and she just burst into tears.
Wow.
She's a single parent with 2 children, a Russian immigrant whose husband had left her due to alcoholism, and she couldn't speak Hebrew. Her 7-year-old son translated for her. And I just remember from that visit how that apartment looked like someone had moved out of it with a few pieces of broken furniture in it and this weeping woman.
So this help is really touching lives and changing lives.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And how is it with the welfare organizations? Because I understand from living for so many years here on this land that sometimes help from Christians can be looked with quite some suspicion upon. So do you have some testimonies from them?
You know, social welfare has always been so grateful. I remember talking with different social workers who don't really have budget to answer all of this need. And so they've come to us actually asking for help. And we've received some warm thank you letters. I have one here with me of a social worker who told us that 70 families in her department received help at the holiday that wouldn't have received it or been able to celebrate with dignity without that help. And she tells us that the fact that there are Christians around the world who understand the crisis that these families are in and are willing to help them, and gives them hope for a better tomorrow.
And that means also the help what we are giving to people, you always make sure that people understand this help is coming from Christians.
Absolutely. Every gift that we give out goes with a card that gives holiday greetings from Christians around the world.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. This is very exciting what you are doing here in this land. And this means also to our listeners that there's a very practical way how we can really touch the lives of hundreds of families here in this land and make a real difference. We have put it on our hearts this year to double the amount of people which we want to bless over this Passover season, and we want to invite you to partner with us. Only $100 can make the difference for an entire family. So if you make a donation of $100, you can change the Passover season for one family here in Israel, and we will make sure that this family hears that there are Christians all over the world which do care for them. The Passover season is a celebration of harvest. The Passover season in particular commemorates the first fruits of the harvest, which represents the entire harvest for the entire year. And the Jewish people came to Jerusalem to bring forth an offering representing the first fruits of their ingathering. And I want to encourage you today to consider over this Passover season to give a first fruit offering to the Jewish people as you change their lives here over Passover in Jerusalem in 2013. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.